I'll flunk you.
Right.
And he gave me a really weird look. And he said, "You really mean that, don't you?" I said, "Yes, I do mean that." We became very good friends. He never missed another lab session. And he did well when he went for his first job down in Tacoma, first division down there. And the newsman called to ask me for a recommendation for him. And I said, "He's good." I said, I didn't tell him the background of it.
Yeah.
And I said, "One thing you can be sure." I said, "A lot of people say, well, these kids don't know, how to handle things." I said, "He'll handle things because Bill is not a person who's going to accept some PR handout and think that that's his story." and so he got the job. Anyway, but so when you say, I had a black student who came in one time, who was in one of my other classes, not in the news, wasn't, he had his paper with him, and the paper was a B, and he said, "You gave me a B on this paper." I said, "Yeah." And he looked at me and he said, "I have to know." He said, "Is this a real B in your opinion, or is this just a black B?" And I looked at him and I said, "That doesn't make one hoot of difference when I'm grading papers." I said, "Look, your paper has a B on it. It's a B paper." And he said, "That's what I've heard about you. You're very fair." And he said, "There are professors on this campus who will say, well, that student didn't really get a B. It was a black B." It's a black B. That meant that they didn't think that their work was really up to getting a B. It was probably a C standard paper, and they gave them a B because they were black, and it was at the time when they were trying to think that they were, doing something. I didn't know that, but somebody said that there were several profs over in the social department who were guilty of that, shall we say. And then they, say, well, that wasn't really. And he had heard that, and he was sensitive about it. And, so I had a reputation as being a fair grader.
What was your favorite class that you liked to teach? Out of all of them that you taught?
Oh, that's hard to say. I enjoyed the documentary class very much. It was a big lecture class, but I enjoyed it because I could. I had a good rapport with the person over in who got filmed for me and all. And you had an opportunity, a lot of times, students who wouldn't have looked at a documentary overall. But we took the class, would then say, I want to watch documentaries more. And I feel that documentaries are important to try to educate people, if they're good documentaries.
Wow.
And I had one student, came up, and I showed a documentary. This was back about the 60s, I guess. Anyway, it was a documentary, I can't remember the name of it, but it was about this drag queen contest, it was like a beauty contest, but it was a drag queen contest, and it was held in New York City, and drag queens from all over the country went there for this. And I had read about the documentary somewhere, and I talked with my friend over there. I said, "Can you get this one?" Anyway, I showed it, and this was in the big hall at that time, the lecture, and so it wasn't just our communication students. This was this 400 level course that kids all over campus did. Anyway, I had this kind of worldly big guy who came up after class, after I showed this, and he came up to me and he said, "You know something?" He said, "It took guts for you to show that." And I said, "Oh." And he said, "Yes, ma'am." And he said, "You know," he said, I never really had any kind of an understanding about what these people would be like." And he said, "That documentary made me see they're human beings, and they have," and he said, and he went on about what all he had taken out of this documentary. And I said, "That's what documentaries are for." I said, "They brighten your eye." And so I really liked that class. I loved the classes where I had our majors, but I enjoyed that class because it would have a mix, and of course the communication students were all in there because they were interested in documentaries. It's hard to say. Yeah.
I didn't put it in I didn't put it in my bag. It's in my bag at the house. But I have a documentary that, I think it was 1996 when it was actually shot. And it was about a punk rock circus.
Oh, really?
About this guy named Chicken John. A bunch of guys, he was basically a really good self-promoter, and he basically got a bunch of kids to travel across the country to do this pseudo-punk. But I remember watching the documentary at work at the medical school right before Christmas. And I remember this girl that she had seen it at the South by South Film Festival, and she had just bought it, and she was playing it and making a VHS tape. And I really didn't want to watch it at the time, but I think it's an hour and a half long, and I think in that 8-hour day I watched it 2.5 times because I was just so sucked into it. And I just actually found a DVD off Amazon.com recently, but I made a VHS copy of it, but it really did influence me, and I show it to a lot of my students now because I just say, listen, this was done in the 90s with, when non-linear editing was just kind of coming out, somewhat, and I said, this is the kind of style that you guys could do very easily nowadays, and very easily a way to do some visual storytelling, and I don't know, probably sometime, I don't know, as I was telling Mom, this is a good time of year for me to travel around and see people, because since I work for myself, I get real busy. I have like 3 football games on Saturdays in September, and then at the end of September, I'll start teaching at one of the alternative schools at night, because that's basically at night, and I got a volleyball game that I just got emailed today for like October, and then in November my basketball season starts, and that'll and if they go to the playoffs again, that'll carry right on into June, and then June through August I have every week's a summer camp, but I would love to come out again sometime. I could send it to you. I could send you a copy of it because it'd be interesting to have you. It's a lot of cuss words in it, but I'm sure you're probably okay with it.
Absolutely.
It's nothing that's gonna. But I would be interesting to get your critique on that documentary. Just have you watch it and just it's called Circus Ridiculous. And just be interesting to get your take on it. I don't know.
I was telling Natalie, I showed a Canadian production because CBC has some great stuff that they have done, and it was just I think, what was it, about 10, 12 minutes, I guess. And anyway, it was a song which this young man, Canadian, as you may be well aware, the Canadian Film Board will give production money to people who submit ideas and want to make it. This young man was a Crow Indian, and he sang this song, and then he had these news clippings from newspapers, and he had a picture that was a very, very dramatic picture of a Crow Indian chief, and there were tears. It was a still picture, but there were these tears running down on each side of his nose. And I don't remember all of the lyrics because it was about, and it went through some of the treaties that were made and were broken and so on, and the chorus she sang, playing this guitar, was Crowfoot, Crowfoot, why the tears? You've been a brave man for 100 years. It was really, and the students really responded to that. It was good, and the Canadian Film Board, it's been so long since some of that stuff. But the one about the gold rush and going up through the Chilkat Trail up to Alaska and all, and who else did that documentary? But anyway, and it had a wonderful scene where these old men are sitting out on this rickety-looking boardwalk sort of place in front in this little place, and one of them says something to the effect that how that he was so sure that he was going to, make it on up there and find gold and so on, but he didn't, and so forth. And then the commentary that went over it and was at the conclusion was, and this is what happened with so many, but they didn't say this. It said there were so many dreams that actually stopped before the Chilkat Pass. They never made it over. Of course, they had to carry, I've forgotten how many pounds of supplies and so forth, which the Mounties enforced that very strictly because they didn't want to die there. And it was a very, very good, an entirely different look at what we think of as the great romantic thing about the gold rush. Yeah.
Well, they're starting to come back in.
Yeah.